Hello, everyone. You're listening to South Bay Sports Radio. I'm your host, Nick Ingram. Today I'm talking with Brian Shapiro, the athletic director at Palos Verdes High School in Palos Verdes, California. What we're talking about is small potatoes in the world of an athletic director, but it's big news in the eyes of those who know the landscape of the South Bay. Not to mention why Palos Verdes has been relegated to hosting football games at 3 p.m. and hosting home playoff games at alternate sites. Last week's playoff game was at South Torrance High School. We'll dig into that today. Ryan, thank you for joining me today. Today's topic is Friday night's football game will be under the lights at PV High. Now, in the past, you guys have used other facilities to host home playoff games. How much on average did it cost to utilize those facilities, and how much has that been alleviated for Friday's game to happen?
Yeah, renting a stadium is not an easy task. It's not only expensive, but there's a lot of paperwork and scrambling, especially during playoff season. You don't necessarily know, as the bracket unfolds, are you going to be home? Are you going to be away? The other schools in the area, are they going to be home? Are they going to be away? So most of the work has to be done last minute, which makes it more difficult, as well as typically more expensive. Also, stadium rentals this time of year tend to come with an extra price tag because there's a lot of holiday activity. There's always a Veterans Day observance. There's Thanksgiving breaks. Most schools now are on break for a week or plus. And so you're paying holiday pay for custodial. A site supervisor who's going to be there is making extras. Renting a stadium is a several $1,000 prospect, depending on whether or not you're at a local high school or a bigger venue like El Camino College. It can be $2,000 or $3,000 or $7,000 or $8,000. And then I think something that a lot of folks overlook too when it comes to expenses of doing these kind of things is um, when you're the home team, you're spared the expense of travel, and we get the double whammy of we're traveling to our home games, so we're still doing buses for football, cheer, song, band, etc. If you really wanted to make good money, you'd go into the bus business because it is exceedingly prohibitively expensive these days. Several $1,000s can be spent on hosting a playoff game.
Last week's game, you hosted at South Torrance. This week's game, were you leaning toward another one of the local schools to host at?
Absolutely. So, South is great because they're the closest school to us. They're actually closer than Peninsula is to us geographically. They're only about 3.5 miles. Peninsula is 4 miles. So it's always been nice. You want to stay as close to home as possible so that your students and families can get there as easily as possible. The other Torrance schools have been great. West Torrance has hosted us in the past. We became kind of football rivals in the early 2010s. And so there was a little bit of a rough relationship there where you don't necessarily want your rival coming into your home facility and being there. So we didn't play there for quite a while. Maricosta has always helped us out too. That stadium's difficult. It has its quirks as there's only bleachers on one side. The rebuilt Zamperini Field is fantastic. They don't have locker room facilities on site, so that's tough when you're doing a football game. So it really becomes a difficult job of finding who's available and who can handle it. San Pedro has hosted us numerous times, and it's kind of fun to go down there and play on a grass field for a playoff game at night. But South was occupied this week. West Torrance was available, and then they were willing to help us out. We continue to try and explore our options, and now that night football at PV has become a little bit more commonplace, it felt appropriate to try and make it happen here this time.
We'll get into that night football at PV later, but what has the process of gaining the necessary support been like, and then the permits, the lighting company? You've had to jump through a lot of hoops to make this happen.
Yeah, it's hard. There is a lot. It's part of the job. And so, it's just you hunker down and get it done. I think when you have in mind the fact that you've got a lot of students and community members who are happy and excited and are going to benefit from this. It helps you stay motivated to do some of the paperwork and scramble to make it happen. Seeing an excited student body and full stands of our own kids makes it worthwhile. Yeah, so with paperwork with the city, they've been really great. They've been really supportive. I mean, we can get into details of how all that stuff works if you want to discuss that. But it's definitely a multi-step process with a lot of parties that kind of have to be involved in order to make it happen.
School board has to sign off on it first, right?
So our school board is pretty supportive of any of our activities. The real advocate that we have at the school level is our superintendent. So that's primarily, the driving force when we rent a stadium or, bring somebody else in to work at our own stadium, that kind of stuff. It's not Palos Verdes High School that is renting. It's the Palos Verdes Peninsula Unified School District that is, signing off on the business side. We have a business office. They're always providing insurance coverage for us and all these events. So it's actually the district, right, that's doing renting and approving for us to host. So on our end, that's where it comes from. Our current superintendent, Dr. Devin Serrano, and our previous superintendent, Dr. Alex Chernus, have really been the leaders and advocating for us to be able to have activity here on campus. And then within our school, the leadership from our principal has been second to none. Dr. Tristan Ramirez has done an excellent job of working with all interested parties and making sure that we can do these events, do them safely, and in such a way that it's a positive experience for the whole community.
Those are some of the bigger supporters, but who else has been supporting this cause to make something that has not happened before happen?
Top to bottom, there's too many people to list out. Our parent group and our booster club they've long desired to see this happen. And this is 3 years ago was the first time that we played a night game. So you're talking about a rollover and turnover in families, but everybody who's involved within our football program. But these games affect, more than that. Our cheer team, our song team, our marching band, our student section, the Red Tide, right? They all have vested interest in this. So their families and those kids are extremely supportive. And you're starting to see, it's interesting to watch the kind of population dynamics and demographics change within the greater peninsula area where there's a lot more younger families coming in. A lot of families now, it's kind of, that fluctuates in cycles. And you have a lot of families who have kids that are being raised on the hill right now that they want these experiences for their children. And so as enrollment kind of climbs in our schools, I think you see some families that are interested and seeing some new things happen on campuses. And there's been so many people. I mean, even like our custodial staff, our ground staff, they have to take on additional work to be working that late at night. So top to bottom, everybody around town has been supportive and helping us out.
Grew up on the Hill. You graduated from Palos Verdes Peninsula High in 1998. When you were growing up, what was the message you got as a kid regarding night playoff games, street lights?
Yeah, so I grew up in RPV, right, in Rancho Palos Verdes on the other side of the hill from our campus. My older sisters went to school at Marilest High before it closed. That's where I would have ended up just geographically. And yeah, I remember being around there. I think that they had some kind of light setups. I remember, being fascinated by watching the high school football games. And then as a student at Peninsula in the 90s, we had, phenomenal football program that was, competing at the highest level in Division One. That team in I think it was fall of '96. It was awesome. And it was real fun to play at home in the daytime, but then you realized you're in for a whole different experience when you would go visit other schools. I remember going to Maricosta as a student in the 90s, and yeah, you get a little bit envious of, some of these other schools. The atmosphere is still going to night games at Maricosta now. They got 3,000 kids in their student body. You can tell there's so many more people that are involved and able to be involved. Parents that are able to get there for those night games. Their band is 100 plus kids strong. So now you got 300 parents in the stands, and it really creates an entirely different atmosphere. As a kid, yeah, I was a little jealous of the other schools that got to do that stuff, but it's also become something special and unique about Peninsula and PV is that day game kind of college feel to it. So it's not without saying that we don't love our day games. It's just nice to be able to host here on campus.
It's been the aura on campus once the student body found out at Friday's game was going to be on campus at 7 o'clock under the lights.
It's so there are two kind of breakthroughs that we've experienced. The first one 3 years ago, getting the first night game. I think that when the kids found out about that, that was just like, oh my gosh, we never thought this would happen ever. This is a close second to that. Is we've football games are mandated by CIF to play at 7 o'clock p.m. unless both schools agree. Every time that we draw a home game, I always ask the visiting school if they would be interested in coming over to our place. Friday early on, Saturday if they want to come during the daytime, and we've yet to find a school that would take us up on that offer. I don't blame them. I understand, the logistics of playing in the evening, and there's a reason why Friday Night Lights is synonymous with high school football. But having, once the student body found out, and especially, when coach was able to tell the team, hey, you guys are actually going to get to play at home for a playoff game, the excitement was pretty loud. We even talked about it, announced it at the volleyball game on Tuesday night in the playoff game, and the crowd was quick to cheer. So there's a very excited student body here today.
Talked about the support, we talked about the school, the community. Have you found any opposition to this?
There's not a like a visible group of opponents to what's going on. I think part of that is because we are sensitive to our community, and we understand we're not looking for sweeping change, because Palos Verdes is a special place. So I think you have to kind of live here to understand why people are the way they are and why things are the way they are. And from an outside, it seems maybe a little archaic or out of date, but everybody growing up here loves and appreciates kind of the outdoor space that we have on the hill. And so there haven't really been any, groups or even individuals, neighbors around the school that have been strongly opposed, but we're trying to be as respectful as possible. And we know that it's a beautiful time of year. Have you seen the sunsets this week? It's a gorgeous time. You don't want to be looking at your window and be looking at our stadium lights. You want to be looking at nature. And especially the way our school is constructed, our stadium sits in a bit of a bowl below an area in our neighborhood. And so going up the hillside, there's quite a few homes that are looking down into our stadium. We don't want that to be illuminated all the time. So I think that as long as we continue to try and be thoughtful and courteous and mindful of what our community wants and needs and experiences, that people will continue to be supportive. So it's been a good experience so far.
Began the football season and the school year in Hawaii with the same team. Did you ever anticipate that would get to a point where you would be talking about hosting a playoff game at home?
No, for as long as I've been around, it's been a desire. One of the hardest things to do is in the playoffs. I mean, number one, you don't know you're going to make the playoffs, and we didn't know until the last second of the regular season that we were going to get a qualifying spot. And then you don't know from week to week whether you'll be a home team, away team, if you'll still be alive or be eliminated. So our city, prefers some advanced planning, and also even just the logistics of being able to reserve the company that does the lights for us. They're busy doing other events, and so there's always been a few too many barriers to get over in order to make it happen. But I think now that we've successfully hosted 3 games, previously, people have seen that it's a nice event, that we do a good job. Our kids will come out and clean the stadium and the streets on Saturday morning as, a little community service. I think we've earned the trust of the city. And as long as we continue, to abuse that people will be supportive of it. There's costs associated. You have to be at the right place and right time. Typically, we reserve the trucks for the lights 6 months in advance. So it was a very pleasant surprise to find out, a week in advance that they were available to come. So I didn't know. I wasn't sitting there on the beach in Honolulu thinking about, yeah, I wonder if this will be the year that we get to play a home playoff game. But I'm so happy for the kids and the community that they get to have that experience.
What are your expectations for tomorrow night?
Well, it's always, as an administrator, it's always, your interest during Friday night, during game night, is split between, making sure that there's a good contest taking place on the field and making sure that it's a safe and positive environment surrounding. And, we're hosting Mayfair, which is a school that we've never played in football. We've played very sparingly in other sports. So there's not, any kind of animosity between the two school groups coming into the game. But yeah, you always have one part of your brain is focusing on what's going on the field and making sure that the game is running smoothly, and then you're trying to make sure it's a positive experience in the crowd, in the stands, in the neighborhood surrounding. So we put in a lot of effort, a lot of work with the PV Estates Police Department. They'll have a presence for us on Friday night. They'll have officers on duty. We bring in outside security staff from CSC. They help keep our events running smoothly. And then, of course, we have our campus security. Those guys do a great job. So there's a whole lot of people that are willing to help. And I think this day and age, you hear a lot of messaging coming from the CIF office about, good events and good sportsmanship and good fan behavior, and putting in some advanced planning to ensure that you have good crowds, that you're set up for success, and that you don't have an infrastructure failure that is going to lead to problems. So we've done a lot of work to prepare that. We work a lot with our student body on what we expect out of them at a game. And they're kids. Sometimes they make mistakes and, take things too far or do something wrong, but then we correct them and teach them and try and do better the next time. So there's a lot of work to make sure that the game is set up and ready to go, as well as that it's a good experience for everybody else who's attending.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian, very much for your time.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Before the school reopened in 2002, Palos Verdes High was used as an intermediate school. Since that time, the football team has hosted playoff games at 3 of the 4 Torrance high schools, San Pedro High, as well as El Camino College. I recently spoke with 2012 CIF champion Matt Lopes, who went on to play football at USC. Matt said PV High tried to get something like this to happen when he was in school there, but now he's very happy for the program. He remembered seeking supporters traveling well, especially to that 2012 championship game against West Torrance at Veterans Stadium in Long Beach. But Matt knows that people are closer when it's a home game. Who knows? Matt might even make an appearance on Friday night. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow along. You'll never know who we'll talk to next.